an audience to that IP than they would have otherwise. And just curious what you think about that model and maybe how that relates to your time at Twitch at all, and
No, I
any
think
kind of thoughts that come into that.
I I thought about this for a while actually because
Mm,
one of our friends, Bill, worked for a company that does licensing of content to people. But in terms of like watching content with someone,
hmm
you know that that's no longer do they need to come into your living room. You just turn them on and they're there. Now you can your favorite streamer you can watch The Office with or
hmm
whatever content is. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. That's really smart. I think
Yep.
there's director's commentary, which people
Yeah.
back in the day you buy a DVD. If you're really bored, if you're really cult following something, you watch the director's commentary. Now it's like, hey, I'm going to go watch this show. I've seen it already. It's funny, but I'd love to get the take of my favorite streamer. And now you can
hmm
do it. I love it. It's just like,
Yeah.
because, you know, a lot of the streaming is, it's second screen, third screen sometimes. And you'd
Yep.
have it on the background. And I mean, how many times have you like had Netflix on it and you don't want to be engaged with it, but it's like, I want to put on something I've seen 100 times and I'll watch my favorite parts, but I like having something in the background. This is the
hmm
equivalent of that now with a streamer.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing about this as well is there's like based on the technology, there's like an interactive component within as well. So it's not just that you're watching the content with the streamer, but you're able to engage with the content. And I don't know if there are like rewards or whatever is provided as well, but it's even more immersive than just watching the content,
Right?
apparently.
No, amazing. I'm looking forward to this. Do we
Yeah,
have
yeah,
do we
we'll
have
see.
time for one more topic or?
Yeah, no, I think so. Let's jump into it. I know there's something you added, so wanna yeah,
Yeah, the
jump in.
one, I was watching this, I was watching, YouTube and it popped up in terms of when should you switch jobs? How long should you
hmm
stay? And there's some stats that I thought were kind of alarming, not alarming, but they're kind of shocking that people who
Yeah,
switch jobs after 2 years make like 50 to 100% more than people who stay in their jobs.
yeah,
I, like, mm, I look back at in recent times, Twitch, I was there almost 5 years.
yeah.
If we tagged, I was also there. Like 10 years, I was with two companies. But then I've done some jumps early in my career. I've definitely switched earlier,
Yep.
when it was needed and things like that. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like, what was your
Yeah.
experience been with both as a personally and as a person who's looking to hire people? What do you
hmm
think about job hunting, both for yourself, job hopping for you, and for your future
Yeah.
hires? Like, how do you look at it?
Yeah. I guess to your first question, I'm thinking about it like for myself. What I think it's kind of dependent on what stage I was in my career.
Yeah,
So, I feel like in the earlier stage where you're just trying to like learn as much as possible, I actually felt like that was those are places that I wanted to stay, a bit longer if possible, just to try to gain, more knowledge that I didn't necessarily have. So I think about my experiences at, Microsoft and Amex, which were my first two gigs at an undergrad. I was there, over 2 years for each of those, just trying to like kind of understand where I wanted to be positioned long term, and knowing what I didn't know and knowing that I wanted to get some skill sets. In the kind of period after that, after early career, I mean, obviously I went from like larger size companies of American Express and Microsoft to start my own company and was there, about 2.5, 3 years. Um, Part of a bunch of companies that were like acquired. So I didn't necessarily perceive it to be job hopping. That's like you're at a company and that company gets acquired, and then you're
right.
there for some time. Um, so I think that I really just try to err toward like learning as much as possible. Now in the later stage of my career is probably what I've done the most kind of hopping per se, and I think that's because um, you know you want to get experience in like leadership roles, especially as you get toward the later stage of your career, because that's primarily the type of opportunities that are going to exist. Like looking for people who have kind of
Right.
people management experience.
Right.
But then also in the later stage of your career, within the game that we play, right? Like you kind of age out of consumer tech at some point. So you
Yeah.
really want to be, especially when you're in like the higher earning years of your career, you want to be optimizing, I think, toward like plays that it's way more clear that the company is going to be successful and you can, make a relatively good income as well. Just to kind of like shore up all of the, kind of resources that you need before you kind of go into like the final years in your career where
Right.
there's not going to be necessarily much growth after that. But if I were to leave people with anything, I'd say learn as much as you can in the first few years. Once you kind of accrued, meaningful skill sets, then you can really start to try to like monetize those. Maybe you could still take some risks, and then when you get to the later part of your career, you should just kind of be optimizing toward making as much money as possible before you get in kind of the retirement phase.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of it is storytelling too, right? You got to think
Hmm.
about your career as a story and what that story is kind of telling. And you could go. I could make a case for the other way around. What you talk
Yeah,
about early in your career, where you're trying to figure things out, switch a little more until you figure it out. Right? Don't. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be like every 3 months getting a new job, but like reasonably, you can stay in terms of like non-tech. If you can go a year and you learn a bunch, and you could jump somewhere else and learn more. Uh, if you think that makes sense, do it. I've done that in a few times where it's like, hey, this is an opportunity I want to turn down. I've only been here a year. I'm just gonna make the jump early. I haven't done that as much late, but I feel like it's warranted early in your career if you feel like you want to make that jump. Like it's kind of, I mean, everybody's a little different. Like my brother has been at the same job his entire career for
hmm,
almost 30 years. He's thought about jumping a few times, but he's never done it. Whereas I've kind of hopped around a bunch. I've been 25 years. I've kind of run the gamut of been at places less than a year to been at places for 5 years. Like it kind of,
yeah,
like you said, it just depends on the situation. And I think everyone, I think one thing is if you're transparent with it, with your manager, like having a great manager is like the thing you do not
so
want to
important,
jump out
so
on.
important.
Like if you're making a little less, but you love your manager and you love what you're doing, just have an open conversation with that person, and I think that will go a long way, right? Like
Yeah,
if you don't like your manager, like the decision is a
yeah.
whole lot easier, right? Would you say?
I 100% agree. And one of the things that my father told me when I was kind of starting my career, he said 90% of your happiness in any job is going to be who you report to. And
Yeah,
that has rang true for me throughout my career. So like, to the extent that you're learning a lot, but you don't vibe with your manager, that could be definitely be an opportunity to leave. And I'm not trying to suggest, I think it's actually good that we have two different approaches because I don't think there's one model that necessarily works. It has to work for you individually and kind of what you're
yeah,
trying to get out of that stage of your career, and that can be different for other people. But just to kind of build off the earlier point that you made around like or the question that you had around how I would evaluate someone who's hopping, I think that as a millennial, I have more empathy towards just kind of like the work world and a lead into a company and knowing that people need to do what's best for them and their families, et cetera. And I think whereas maybe older generations would see somebody leaving every kind of 1 to 2 years and be very kind of concerned about that. I do think the story is important, but I also realize that people got to do what's best for them and their families and things are going on in your life. And I think that's like a positive trend for people, especially those early in their careers, to be able to have more license to kind of go out and try new things now with kind of like the new wave of leadership that's coming into companies that are kind of in the mid to senior leadership phase. So people should definitely take advantage of that. That is kind of like a changing time and the psychology around what hopping means or what figuring out life in the work world and being able to balance that.